Some people think a badge gives them the right to decide who belongs on the road. They forget that the truth always catches up faster than they expect. The late afternoon sun stretched across Interstate 85 just outside Atlanta, painting long shadows over the endless stream of traffic as commuters hurried home. Pickup trucks, delivery vans, family SUVs, and luxury sedans rolled steadily beneath a cloudless Georgia sky, each driver focused on reaching the next exit before rush hour swallowed the highway completely. Among them was Monica Brooks, a 38-year-old black woman whose quiet confidence stood out more than the sleek black luxury sedan she drove. She kept both hands lightly on the steering wheel, her posture relaxed, her expression calm, while soft jazz played through the speakers at a volume barely loud enough to compete with the gentle hum of the tires against the pavement. To anyone passing by, she looked like another professional finishing an ordinary workday. Nothing about her suggested urgency. Nothing invited attention. Yet only a few miles away, Officer Ryan Carter had already decided otherwise. Parked on the shoulder inside his patrol vehicle, Ryan watched the flow of traffic with narrowed eyes, scanning license plates almost absent-mindedly until Monica's sedan entered his view. His attention sharpened immediately. He leaned forward, studying the expensive vehicle as it moved effortlessly between lanes with complete confidence. A skeptical frown crossed his face. He muttered something under his breath before starting the engine. Within seconds, his cruiser merged onto the interstate and settled several car lengths behind Monica. She noticed the patrol car in her mirror but showed no reaction. She maintained the speed limit, signaled every lane change, and continued driving exactly as before. Ryan, however, seemed determined to stay close. The distance between the two vehicles gradually disappeared until his front bumper hovered uncomfortably behind hers. Drivers in neighboring lanes glanced over briefly before continuing on their way, unaware that something unusual was beginning to unfold. Ryan switched on his emergency lights, their blue reflections flashing across Monica's rear window. She calmly activated her turn signal and guided her sedan toward the shoulder, choosing a wide section with plenty of space away from moving traffic. Her movements were patient, deliberate, almost rehearsed. Ryan pulled in behind her with unnecessary speed, stopping so abruptly that loose gravel scattered beneath his tires. He stepped out, adjusted his duty belt, and walked toward Monica's driver's side window with measured confidence. She lowered the window before he reached the door, offering a polite greeting that was met only with a hard stare. Ryan's eyes drifted across the interior of the vehicle before settling back on her face. His questions came quickly, his tone carrying more suspicion than curiosity. Monica answered each one evenly, never raising her voice, never matching his attitude. The calmness in her response seemed only to frustrate him further. As passing cars continued rushing by only a few feet away, Ryan suddenly returned to his cruiser without another word. Monica watched through her mirror as he climbed inside, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and looked directly toward her sedan. For a brief moment, everything became strangely still. Then, instead of remaining parked, the patrol vehicle rolled forward. At first it seemed almost accidental, moving only a few feet. Then it accelerated. The front bumper struck the rear corner of Monica's parked sedan with enough force to jolt both vehicles but not enough to cause a major collision. Nearby drivers hit their brakes, horns echoed across the highway, and several witnesses immediately reached for their phones. Monica slowly stepped out of her car, glanced once at the fresh damage, then looked directly at Ryan without anger or panic. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, checked the time on her watch, and gave the faintest hint of a smile. In a calm voice that barely rose above the passing traffic, she said, "You're right on schedule." Monica did not rush to inspect the damage. She simply rested one hand on the roof of her sedan and watched the afternoon traffic slow as curious drivers carefully passed the unusual scene. The warm breeze carried the distant sound of engines and impatient horns, but her breathing never changed. She looked more like someone waiting for an appointment than someone standing beside a damaged vehicle on the shoulder of a busy interstate. Officer Ryan Carter climbed out of his cruiser with the confidence of someone who believed every witness would naturally accept his version of events. He adjusted his uniform, straightened the small camera attached to his chest, and walked toward Monica carrying a notepad beneath one arm. "You made an unsafe stop," he said firmly. "You created a hazard for everyone on this highway." Monica looked at him quietly for several seconds before answering. "I followed your emergency lights exactly as instructed, officer." Ryan gave a short laugh that sounded more dismissive than amused. "That is not how I see it." Around them, more vehicles slowed as drivers noticed the flashing patrol lights. Several people stood near the guardrail with their phones raised, recording from a safe distance without interfering. A delivery driver quietly shook his head while speaking to another motorist who had stopped several yards away. No one could hear their conversation above the constant roar of traffic, but every face carried the same expression of uncertainty. Monica glanced briefly toward the growing number of onlookers before returning her attention to Ryan. "May I ask if everyone is safe?" she said. Ryan frowned, clearly expecting an argument instead of a simple question. "Everyone is fine," he answered. "For now." He began writing on his notepad, occasionally looking up as though building a story one sentence at a time. Monica folded her hands comfortably in front of her. She neither interrupted nor protested. Her unusual composure only seemed to deepen Ryan's irritation. "You seem awfully calm," he observed. "Most people would be a lot more concerned right now." Monica offered a small, respectful smile. Being calm usually helps people make better decisions. Ryan closed his notepad with a sharp motion. "You think this is a joke?" "No, officer," she replied. "I think every decision matters." Those words lingered between them as another State Patrol vehicle briefly slowed in the far lane before continuing without stopping. The afternoon sun reflected across Monica's windshield, illuminating a small government parking decal tucked neatly into one corner of the glass. Ryan noticed it for only a moment before dismissing it as unimportant. His attention remained fixed on proving that he controlled the situation. Monica reached into her jacket pocket slowly enough that every movement could be clearly seen. Ryan immediately became alert. She removed nothing more than her cell phone. Without turning away from him, she unlocked the screen, typed a short message consisting of only a few words, and pressed send. The entire action lasted less than 10 seconds. Ryan smirked. "Calling a lawyer already?" Monica slipped the phone back into her pocket. "No." "Family, then." She looked toward the open highway where sunlight shimmered across the pavement like waves of heat. "Someone who needs accurate information." Ryan folded his arms. "Well, whoever it is, they are going to hear the same story I write in this report." Monica checked the time once more before lifting her eyes to meet his. "Reports are important," she said softly. "Timing is even more important." Ryan followed her gaze down the highway but saw nothing except ordinary traffic stretching toward the horizon. He smiled with quiet confidence, completely unaware that somewhere beyond the next curve, events had already begun moving in a direction neither his report nor his assumptions could possibly control. Ryan Carter had spent enough years wearing a badge to believe confidence alone could settle almost any situation. To him, uncertainty was a weakness, and hesitation invited questions he did not want to answer. He glanced toward the growing line of stopped vehicles and noticed more phones pointed in his direction. Instead of making him cautious, the attention seemed to reinforce his determination to appear completely in control. "Step away from your vehicle," he instructed. Monica nodded without protest and moved exactly where he indicated. She neither challenged his authority nor attempted to explain herself again. Her calm obedience puzzled several of the witnesses standing nearby. One elderly man quietly whispered to his wife that the woman had done nothing to deserve the tension surrounding her. A young college student continued recording from a safe distance, careful not to interfere, sensing that something important was unfolding beyond what anyone could immediately understand. Ryan circled Monica's sedan, carefully studying every detail as if searching for something that would justify the assumptions already formed in his mind. The luxury vehicle was spotless despite the long drive. The registration displayed no problems. The insurance information appeared current. Every answer Monica provided matched the document she calmly handed to him. Yet instead of reducing his suspicion, each ordinary detail seemed to frustrate him even more. He looked back toward Monica, who remained standing quietly beneath the afternoon sun. There was no fear in her expression. No impatience. No visible anger. She simply watched the traffic flowing past the scene while the warm Georgia breeze gently moved the loose strands of her hair. Ryan finally broke the silence. "Where were you headed?" Monica answered honestly. "An official meeting." "With who?" She met his eyes. "The people expecting me already know." Ryan frowned. "That is not an answer." "It is the only answer I am authorized to give." Those words lingered in the air. Authorized. The choice of language caught his attention for only a second before he dismissed it. "Everybody suddenly has secrets when they get stopped," he replied with a sarcastic smile. Monica did not respond. Instead, she looked once more toward the southern horizon. The traffic noise remained steady, but beneath it another sound slowly emerged. It was so faint that only someone listening carefully would have noticed it. A deep mechanical rumble rolled across the distance, disappearing beneath passing tractor-trailers before returning again a few moments later. Ryan never acknowledged it. His attention remained focused on finishing the paperwork resting against the hood of his patrol vehicle. Several witnesses exchanged uncertain glances after hearing the unfamiliar sound, but no one could identify where it was coming from. Monica quietly checked her watch for the third time that afternoon. Exactly 4 minutes had passed since she sent the message. She slipped the watch beneath her sleeve and folded her hands again. Ryan noticed the movement and shook his head. "You keep looking at the time like you are expecting somebody." Monica answered with complete honesty. "I am." "Well, they are taking their time." She smiled politely. "No. They are arriving exactly when they planned." Before Ryan could answer, another low vibration seemed to ripple through the pavement beneath everyone's feet. It lasted only a second before fading into the background noise of the interstate. One of the bystanders lowered his phone and looked toward the distant overpass. A woman standing beside him narrowed her eyes as if trying to focus on something far beyond the curve in the highway. Ryan remained unconcerned. "Whatever game you are playing," he said confidently, "it is over." Monica's expression never changed. She simply looked beyond him toward the road stretching into the distance, where sunlight reflected against something moving far away, something still too distant for anyone to recognize but steadily growing larger with every passing second. The faint vibration grew stronger until it was no longer something people imagined beneath their feet. Drivers passing on the interstate began slowing almost instinctively, their attention shifting from the flashing patrol lights to the distant horizon beyond the overpass. The low mechanical sound rolled across the highway in steady waves, deeper than ordinary traffic and too organized to be random. Monica remained exactly where she was, standing beside her sedan with remarkable patience. She neither smiled nor celebrated. She simply waited. Officer Ryan Carter noticed several witnesses looking away from him and toward the approaching noise. Curious, he turned his head for the first time. At first he saw nothing except shimmering heat rising above the pavement. Then tiny dark shapes appeared beyond the curve, moving in perfect formation. He narrowed his eyes, trying to identify them. "Construction convoy," he muttered. Dismissively, more to himself than anyone else. A middle-aged truck driver standing near the guardrail quietly shook his head. "That does not look like construction." Another witness lowered her phone for a moment before lifting it again, this time pointing the camera toward the distant vehicles instead of the traffic stop. Within seconds, more people followed her example. Every lens turned toward the same approaching formation. Ryan forced a confident smile. "Everyone can relax," he announced loudly, as though addressing an invisible audience. "This has nothing to do with this stop." Monica finally spoke after nearly a full minute of silence. "Are you certain?" Ryan answered without hesitation. "Absolutely." She gave a small nod, almost as though acknowledging that his answer had been expected. The approaching vehicles became clearer with every passing moment. Their outlines emerged through the afternoon haze, moving with disciplined precision instead of ordinary highway spacing. Their speed remained steady, neither rushing nor slowing, as though every second had already been carefully planned long before anyone on the shoulder realized they were coming. The deep rumble that had once blended into the background now filled the air. Nearby conversation stopped. Even the constant stream of passing traffic seemed quieter as drivers instinctively eased off their accelerators to watch the unusual procession. Ryan reached for the radio attached to his shoulder and requested routine information from dispatch. His voice remained calm, but the operator's reply took noticeably longer than expected. Static briefly interrupted the transmission before the dispatcher finally responded with an unusually careful tone. "Stand by, Officer Carter." Ryan frowned. Dispatch rarely asked him to wait. He pressed the transmit button again. "Can you identify the convoy approaching Interstate 85 near mile marker 194? Another pause followed. Longer this time. Several witnesses exchanged uneasy glances while the approaching vehicles continued closing the distance. Monica quietly looked toward the horizon without saying a word. The dispatcher returned, sounding noticeably more formal than before. "Officer Carter, remain at your current location. Additional units are aware of the situation." Ryan looked around in confusion. "What additional units?" The radio remained silent. No explanation followed. He tapped the microphone once more. "Dispatch." Nothing. Only static. Ryan lowered his hand slowly, his confidence beginning to show the smallest crack. Monica observed him with the same calm expression she had carried since the moment she stepped out of her car. "Communication changes when the right people become involved," she said softly. Ryan looked at her sharply. "What exactly does that mean?" Monica did not answer immediately. Instead, she watched as the lead vehicle reached the overpass and sunlight reflected across its reinforced exterior. Behind it came another. Then another. The line continued growing until counting them became impossible at a glance. The organized formation reduced speed together with remarkable precision before turning toward the emergency access lane leading directly to the roadside where everyone stood. Conversation stopped completely. Cell phones remained raised. The only sound left was the synchronized rumble of powerful engines drawing closer, and for the first time that afternoon, Ryan Carter realized he no longer understood what kind of situation he was standing in. The convoy slowed with flawless precision, each vehicle maintaining the exact same distance from the one ahead until the entire formation came to a synchronized stop along the emergency access lane. Dust drifted gently through the warm afternoon air before settling across the pavement. No sirens echoed. No dramatic commands filled the highway. The silence that followed felt even heavier than the rumble that had announced their arrival. Drivers in passing cars stared through their windows, many slowing well below the speed limit before traffic officers farther down the interstate encouraged them to continue moving. The witnesses standing near the guardrail remained frozen, their phones recording every second. Someone quietly counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. The number kept climbing until he stopped in disbelief. 11 reinforced vehicles now stood motionless less than 100 yards from Monica's damaged sedan. Ryan Carter swallowed quietly. He had seen specialized federal vehicles before during joint operations, but never this many gathered for what had started as an ordinary roadside stop. He immediately reached for his shoulder radio again. "Dispatch, I need immediate clarification." Only static answered him. He tried another channel. Then another. Every attempt produced the same empty response. Monica watched him without satisfaction or resentment. There was only patience in her expression, as though everything unfolding matched a schedule known only to her. "You seem concerned now," she observed gently. Ryan lowered the radio. "Who are you?" Monica answered without hesitation. "The same person I was 15 minutes ago." "That is not what I asked." "It is still the truth." Before Ryan could continue, the driver's door of the lead vehicle opened. A tall man wearing a dark tactical uniform stepped onto the pavement with measured confidence. He was not hurried. He was not theatrical. Every movement reflected discipline developed over decades rather than urgency created by the moment. Several additional personnel exited the remaining vehicles, positioning themselves calmly around the convoy without displaying aggression or unnecessary force. Their coordinated professionalism immediately changed the atmosphere surrounding the roadside. Even the bystanders sensed that this was no ordinary law enforcement response. The tall officer adjusted an earpiece, glanced briefly toward Monica, and offered the smallest respectful nod before continuing forward. Monica returned the nod just once. Ryan noticed the exchange immediately. "You know him?" Monica replied calmly. "Yes." "Who is he?" "You will be introduced soon enough." Ryan suddenly became aware that the confidence he had carried all afternoon had quietly disappeared. Questions were arriving faster than answers, and every assumption he had made since activating his emergency light seemed less certain by the minute. The approaching officer stopped several yards away and surveyed the entire scene with careful attention. His eyes moved across the damaged sedan, the patrol cruiser, the witnesses recording with their phones, and finally Officer Carter himself. Nothing escaped his notice. Yet instead of speaking immediately, he looked toward Monica first. He asked respectfully, "Are you all right?" Monica gave a simple nod. "Yes." "Thank you." Ryan blinked in surprise. The formality in the man's voice was unmistakable. It was not courtesy offered to a stranger. It was respect offered to someone whose position mattered. Ryan stepped forward instinctively. "Officer Ryan Carter, Georgia Highway Patrol. I need identification and an explanation for this operation." The tall man turned toward him with complete composure. "You will receive both at the appropriate time." Ryan stiffened. "I am the reporting officer here." At this moment, the man replied evenly, "Your report is only one small part of a much larger situation." Those words settled over the highway like a sudden change in weather. The witnesses exchanged bewildered glances. Monica remained perfectly still. Far above, a helicopter could now be heard approaching from the south, its distant rotor blades blending with the steady hum of the interstate. Ryan slowly looked from the convoy to Monica and back again, finally realizing that the quiet woman he believed he understood had never once appeared surprised by anything that had happened since the first emergency lights flashed behind her. Ryan Carter opened his mouth to speak again, but the sound of the approaching helicopter gradually filled the sky above the interstate. Its steady rhythm echoed across the concrete barriers before a dark aircraft appeared from the southern horizon, circling once at a safe altitude as if confirming every detail below. Nobody on the shoulder said a word. The witnesses simply kept recording. Even the passing drivers seemed unusually quiet as they glanced toward the extraordinary gathering unfolding beside the highway. The senior officer from the convoy calmly reached into his jacket and removed a secure communication device. After listening for several seconds, he nodded once. "Confirmed," he said. "Proceeding according to schedule." Ryan took another step forward. "I am requesting identification again." The officer met his eyes with complete professionalism. "Commander Ethan Hayes, Federal Protective Operations." He displayed his credentials briefly before returning them to his pocket. The movement was smooth and deliberate, offering neither challenge nor apology. Ryan immediately recognized the federal seal. His expression changed, but only for a moment. "Federal Protective Operations," he repeated. "What does that have to do with a traffic stop?" Commander Hayes answered carefully. "This is no longer simply a traffic stop." Ryan looked toward Monica. "You knew this was coming." Monica nodded once. "I knew someone would respond after I reported what happened." Ryan folded his arms. "Reported to who?" Monica looked at him calmly. "The people responsible for protecting the mission I was traveling to support." Those words settled heavily over the scene. Mission. Support. Ryan replayed every conversation they had shared since the emergency lights first appeared behind her vehicle. She had never lied. She had never argued. She had simply answered each question with remarkable precision. Commander Hayes stepped toward Monica. "Thank you for remaining where you were instructed." "Of course," she replied. "Has Colonel Brooks arrived?" "He is less than 2 minutes away." Several witnesses exchanged confused looks after hearing the unfamiliar name. Ryan noticed them as well. "Colonel?" he asked quietly. Monica did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the helicopter now maintaining a steady position overhead. "My father believes preparation prevents unnecessary conflict," she finally said. "He prefers everyone understand the facts before reaching conclusions." Ryan stared at her. "Your father is military." Monica smiled politely. "He has spent his career serving this country." Before Ryan could ask another question, another black sport utility vehicle entered the emergency access road, escorted by 2 federal vehicles already positioned farther back in the convoy. It stopped directly beside the lead armored vehicle. The driver stepped out first, opened the rear passenger door, and stood respectfully aside. An older man wearing a neatly pressed service uniform emerged with calm confidence. His silver hair reflected the afternoon sunlight, and years of leadership showed in every measured step he took. Nobody rushed toward him. Nobody shouted commands. Yet everyone present instinctively recognized that his arrival had shifted the balance of authority without a single raised voice. Monica's expression softened for the first time that afternoon. She offered a warm smile as the man approached. "Good afternoon, Dad." Colonel Marcus Brooks returned the smile with quiet pride. "I am sorry your day took such an unexpected turn." "So am I," Monica answered. The colonel looked briefly at the damaged sedan before turning toward Commander Hayes. "Has everything been documented?" "Yes, Colonel. Multiple recordings, official vehicle telemetry, and witness statements are already being preserved." Ryan felt his heartbeat quicken. Every sentence revealed another layer of a situation far larger than he had imagined. For the first time since activating his emergency lights, he realized that the report he intended to write was no longer the document that would define what happened on this stretch of highway. Ryan Carter suddenly became aware that every person around him had stopped looking at Monica as an ordinary driver. Their attention had shifted completely. The witnesses lowered their voices. Federal personnel waited patiently without unnecessary movement. Even the helicopter maintained a steady position overhead as though every element of the response had been carefully coordinated long before anyone arrived on the interstate. Colonel Marcus Brooks stepped closer to his daughter and briefly examined the damage to her vehicle. His expression remained composed. There was disappointment in his eyes, but not anger. He had spent too many years making difficult decisions to allow emotion to replace judgment. "Are you injured?" he asked quietly. Monica shook her head. "No, sir. I am fine." The colonel gave a slight nod before turning toward Commander Ethan Hayes. "Good. That is what matters most." Ryan finally found his voice again. "Colonel Brooks, with respect, I still do not understand why federal assets are responding to this incident." The colonel faced him calmly. "Because this incident interrupted a federally coordinated operation involving protected personnel traveling to a scheduled security briefing." Ryan frowned. "Protected personnel?" Commander Hayes answered before Monica could speak. "Ms. Monica Brooks serves as a senior civilian strategic advisor assigned to an interagency emergency preparedness program. Her movements today were documented in advance through multiple participating agencies due to the nature of the meeting she was attending." Ryan looked back at Monica, struggling to connect the quiet woman he had questioned beside the highway with the explanation he had just heard. "You work with them?" Monica smiled politely. "I work with many people. My responsibility is helping different organizations prepare before emergencies happen instead of after they begin." Ryan remembered every answer she had given throughout the afternoon. She had never exaggerated her importance. She had never attempted to impress him with titles or credentials. In fact, she had carefully avoided using them. Commander Hayes continued speaking. When Ms. Brooks reported that her government-cleared transportation route had been interrupted under unusual circumstances, established response procedures were automatically initiated. Ryan slowly looked toward the long line of reinforced vehicles. That response involved all of this? It involved ensuring the safety of protected personnel, preserving official evidence, and maintaining continuity of a scheduled federal operation, Hayes replied evenly. Everything you see here followed existing protocol. Several witnesses exchanged astonished glances after hearing the explanation. The young college student recording the event quietly whispered, she never even told him who she was. An older woman standing nearby nodded. She did not have to. Ryan lowered his eyes for a brief moment. The realization settled heavily upon him. Monica had been given countless opportunities to react emotionally, argue, or use her position to influence the encounter. Instead, she had chosen patience every single time. Colonel Brooks noticed Ryan's expression and spoke with surprising gentleness. Officer Carter, leadership is often measured by how we treat people before we know anything about them. Titles are temporary. Character is visible immediately. Ryan remained silent. There was nothing defensive left in his posture. He simply listened. Commander Hayes received another brief transmission through his earpiece before looking toward the colonel. Sir, the documentation team has secured the vehicle telemetry, roadside camera recordings, and independent witness footage. The timeline is complete. Excellent, Colonel Brooks replied. He then turned back toward Monica with a quiet smile. You handled yourself exactly the way I always hoped you would. Monica's eyes softened. You taught me that calm decisions last longer than emotional reactions. The colonel nodded proudly. Around them, the tension that had dominated the roadside all afternoon slowly gave way to something entirely different. It was no longer uncertainty. It was understanding. The crowd had come expecting to witness another ordinary traffic stop. Instead, they had watched a lesson unfold without raised voices, without revenge, and without anyone needing to announce where true authority had been standing from the very beginning. Commander Ethan Hayes looked toward the federal documentation team and gave a subtle nod. Within moments, several specialists approached the roadside with tablets, cameras, and evidence cases, moving with quiet efficiency instead of urgency. They documented the position of every vehicle, photographed the roadway from multiple angles, and synchronized timestamps with the recordings already collected from dashboard cameras, highway traffic monitors, and witness submissions. Nothing about the process felt rushed because nothing needed to be. Every important moment had already been preserved. Ryan Carter stood silently beside his patrol vehicle, watching the investigation develop around him. Only minutes earlier he had believed he controlled every detail of the situation. Now he realized he was simply one participant in a much larger record of events. Commander Hayes approached him with the same professional composure he had maintained from the beginning. Officer Carter, he said evenly, your body camera, vehicle camera, radio communications, and vehicle telemetry will all become part of the official review. You are encouraged to complete your written statement while the details remain fresh. Ryan nodded slowly. Am I being accused of something? Hayes answered carefully. This is an administrative fact-finding process. The evidence will speak for itself. Ryan lowered his eyes for a moment before quietly removing his notepad from the hood of the patrol car. For the first time that afternoon, he hesitated before writing a single word. Across the shoulder of the interstate, Monica watched without satisfaction. There was no celebration in her expression because this was never about humiliating anyone. She understood that accountability carried more value than embarrassment. Colonel Marcus Brooks noticed his daughter's thoughtful expression. You could have identified yourself the moment he approached, he said. Monica looked toward the damaged corner of her sedan before answering. If respect only appears after a title is revealed, then it was never respect. It was recognition of authority. The colonel smiled faintly. That is exactly the lesson your grandfather tried to teach me. Nearby, several witnesses were invited to voluntarily share copies of their recordings with the documentation team. The young college student stepped forward first. I recorded everything from the moment the patrol car stopped, he explained. An older couple followed, each offering photographs they had taken from different angles. A delivery driver quietly remarked, "She stayed calm the entire time. She never argued once." Federal personnel thanked each witness individually, carefully logging every submission before returning the devices. The respectful professionalism impressed everyone watching. No one was pressured. No one was ignored. Every voice mattered because every perspective helped establish the complete timeline. Ryan listened as one witness described Monica's calm demeanor, another recalled the sequence of vehicle movements, and another confirmed hearing the conversation before the convoy arrived. Piece by piece, the afternoon reconstructed itself through independent observations instead of assumptions. Commander Hayes closed his tablet and looked toward Colonel Brooks. "Sir, the preliminary timeline is complete. Every significant event has been independently corroborated." The colonel nodded. "Good. Truth becomes much stronger when it no longer depends on only one person's memory." Ryan quietly absorbed those words. He realized that no explanation, no assumption, and no first impression carried the same weight as carefully preserved facts viewed together. Monica stepped toward her father as a transport specialist informed her that another secure vehicle was ready to continue her trip to the scheduled briefing. She glanced once more at the highway stretching into the distance where ordinary traffic had already resumed its normal rhythm. The afternoon would soon move on for everyone else, but the lessons recorded on that narrow stretch of pavement would remain long after the damaged vehicles were gone, preserved not by emotion or opinion, but by patience, evidence, and the quiet strength of choosing dignity when it would have been far easier to choose anger. The last photographs were taken as the afternoon sun slowly dipped toward the western horizon, casting long golden reflections across the interstate. One by one, the federal vehicles prepared to depart with the same quiet discipline that had marked their arrival. There were no dramatic speeches, no celebration, and no applause. The greatest moments of accountability rarely needed any of those things. They simply required people willing to let truth speak louder than assumptions. Monica Brooks stood beside the replacement vehicle that had arrived to continue her journey. A transportation specialist opened the rear passenger door, but before stepping inside, she turned back toward the roadside one final time. Officer Ryan Carter remained beside his patrol vehicle, his unfinished report still resting on the hood where he had left it. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ryan walked forward at a measured pace and stopped several feet away. His voice no longer carried the certainty that had defined the beginning of the afternoon. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly, "I should have treated you differently before I knew anything about you." Monica looked at him with the same calm expression she had carried from the beginning. "You should have treated me that way because you knew nothing about me." Ryan lowered his eyes briefly before nodding. There was no argument left to make because he understood exactly what she meant. Respect was never supposed to depend upon someone's title, career, or connections. It began long before any of those things were revealed. Colonel Marcus Brooks stepped beside his daughter and extended his hand toward Ryan. After a brief hesitation, Ryan accepted it. The colonel spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime leading people through difficult moments. "Officer Carter, every career presents moments that define us. Sometimes they arrive without warning. The important question is not whether we make mistakes. The important question is whether we are willing to learn from them." Ryan nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." Commander Ethan Hayes approached with a final update. "Colonel, the documentation package has been secured. The official review will proceed through normal administrative channels." "Thank you, Commander," Colonel Brooks replied. "Let the process do its work." Hayes offered a respectful nod before signaling to his team. One after another, the 11 armored vehicles pulled away from the shoulder in perfect formation, merging smoothly onto the interstate until they gradually disappeared beyond the distant overpass. The helicopter banked gently toward the south and soon became nothing more than a fading silhouette against the bright evening sky. The witnesses slowly returned to their own lives, carrying with them a story none of them had expected to witness on an ordinary weekday. Some would remember the convoy. Others would remember the federal response. But many would remember something even more important. They would remember the quiet woman who never raised her voice, never relied on her position, and never allowed someone else's assumptions to define her character. Monica entered the waiting vehicle, and as the door closed, she looked once more through the window at the highway stretching toward the horizon. Traffic flowed normally again, as though the afternoon had already become part of history. Yet for everyone who had stood on that roadside, something lasting had changed. They had seen how quickly appearances could deceive, how easily assumptions could replace understanding, and how dignity could remain unshaken even under unfair judgment. As the vehicle carried Monica toward the meeting she had almost missed, the fading sunlight illuminated the empty stretch of pavement where everything had begun only a short time earlier. A badge may grant authority, but character determines how that authority is used. And on that quiet Georgia highway, the greatest display of strength did not arrive inside an armored convoy. It had been standing there from the very beginning, calm enough to let the truth arrive on its own schedule.